Imagine a man who saved an empire, a general whose name struck terror into the hearts of Rome's most fearsome enemies. He was the shield, the sword, the last hope of a teetering world. So why was he betrayed? Why was the very man who held the empire together cut down, not by a foreign foe, but by the very people he fought to protect? This is the story of a hero Rome couldn't live with, and ultimately couldn't live without. Our story begins in the turbulent 5th century. The Western Roman Empire is a shadow of its former self, besieged on all sides. Barbarian tribes, once kept at bay, now pour across the frontiers. Goths, Vandals, Franks. They see a dying giant, ripe for the plunder. Rome's armies are stretched thin, its coffers empty, and its leadership is a viper's nest of intrigue and paranoia. The emperor, Valentinian III, sits on the throne in Ravenna, a ruler in name, but a pawn in the games of his court. In this age of chaos, one man stands as the bedrock of Roman power, Flavius Idius. Idius wasn't your typical Roman aristocrat. His early life was a lesson in survival. Born in a frontier province, he spent his youth as a hostage, first among the Goths, and later among the Huns. But these were not years of victimhood. They were his education. He learned their languages, their customs, and most importantly, their way of war. He befriended the future kings of these peoples, forging relationships that would become his greatest diplomatic weapon. He understood the barbarian mind better than any Roman of his generation. When he returned to the empire, he brought with him not just knowledge, but an army of loyal Hunnic mercenaries. He was a force to be reckoned with. Through sheer military genius and cunning diplomacy, Idius climbed the treacherous ladder of Roman politics. He wasn't just a general, he was the de facto ruler of the West. He played the barbarian tribes against each other like chess pieces. He'd hire one tribe to fight another, then make a treaty with his former enemy. He defeated the Goths in Gaul, crushed uprisings, and pushed back the Franks. For 2 decades, he was the puppeteer holding the fragile Western Empire together. He was called the last of the Romans, a title that spoke volumes. He embodied the old Roman virtues of duty and strength in an age of decay. The people loved him. The army was loyal to him alone, and that was the problem. In the corridors of the imperial palace, his success bred jealousy. Courtiers whispered in the emperor's ear. They painted Idius not as a savior, but as a threat. They claimed he was too powerful, that his ambition was to overthrow the emperor and place his own son on the throne. Valentinian, a weak and insecure ruler, started to listen. He saw Idius's strength not as a shield for the empire, but as a shadow eclipsing his own authority. The seeds of betrayal were sown. Then came the ultimate test. A threat unlike any seen before emerged from the east. Attila, the Hun, the scourge of God, turned his attention to the west. He led a massive, seemingly unstoppable horde, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. All of Gaul trembled. Rome was in a panic. Who could possibly stop him? There was only one man, Idius. Putting aside all political rivalries, Idius forged the unlikeliest of alliances. He convinced his old enemy, the Visigothic king Theodoric, to join forces with him. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy. Romans and Goths, who had fought each other for generations, would now stand side by side against a common foe. In 451 AD, near Chalons, in modern-day France, the two massive armies clashed. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains was one of the bloodiest and most decisive battles of antiquity. It was a brutal, swirling melee that lasted all day. Theodoric, the Gothic king, was killed in the fighting, but by nightfall, the Huns were broken. Idius had done the impossible. He had stopped Attila the Hun. He was at the pinnacle of his power and fame. He had saved Western civilization. Surely, now his position was secure. But a hero's welcome can quickly turn into a death sentence. Attila, though defeated, was not destroyed. The next year, he invaded Italy itself, sacking cities and marching toward Rome. Idius, his army depleted from the great battle, couldn't risk another direct confrontation. Instead, he shadowed Attila's forces, harassing them, while Pope Leo the Great led a diplomatic mission to persuade the Hunnic king to turn back. Miraculously, Attila retreated. Rome was saved again. But in the eyes of the court, Idias's inability to meet Attila in a second decisive battle was framed as failure, or worse, deliberate inaction. The whispers in the palace grew louder. The chief conspirator was a senator named Petronius Maximus, a rival who coveted Idias's power, and the eunuch Heraclius, the emperor's chamberlain. They convinced Valentinian that Idias was plotting to assassinate him. They played on the emperor's deepest insecurities, telling him that as long as Idias lived, he would never be a true ruler. On September 21st, 454 AD, Idias was summoned to the imperial court in Ravenna to deliver a financial report. He came unarmed, suspecting nothing. He was the commander-in-chief, the savior of the empire, reporting to his emperor. As Idias presented the accounts, Valentinian suddenly leaped from his throne, accusing him of treason. Before Idias could react, the emperor himself drew his sword and plunged it into the general's chest. The palace guards, following their emperor's lead, joined in, hacking the defenseless general to pieces. The man who had faced down Attila the Hun died on the palace floor, murdered by the very emperor he had sworn to protect. The betrayal was complete, and the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. When a Roman official later told the emperor, "You have cut off your right hand with your left," he was speaking the grim truth. With Idias gone, the intricate web of alliances and treaties he had maintained for decades dissolved overnight. The army lost its only capable leader. The assassination created a power vacuum that plunged the empire into chaos. Just 6 months later, Emperor Valentinian was himself assassinated by 2 of Idias's former bodyguards, likely instigated by the vengeful senator Petronius Maximus. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. With its greatest defender dead, the empire was left defenseless. Less than a year after Idias's murder, the Vandal king Gazaric sailed from Carthage and sacked the city of Rome, a brutal pillaging that lasted for 2 weeks. The shield was gone. The story of Flavius Idias is a timeless tragedy. It's a cautionary tale about how fear and jealousy in the halls of power can destroy the very foundations of a state. Rome feared Idias's strength, but it was that very strength that held off the darkness. In betraying him, the Roman elite did not secure their own power. They signed the death warrant for the Western Roman Empire. Within 22 years of his murder, the last Roman emperor would be deposed, and the empire in the West would be no more. The last of the Romans was gone, and Rome itself soon followed. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from history. See you next time.